Buffalo's debt collection scams, a new breed of exploitation targeting the innocent. Buffalo, NY has become a focal point in recent years for aggressive and deceptive debt collection schemes, many of which target non-criminal civilians, including women and vulnerable individuals, in ways that echo the city's darker past of notorious collectors and criminal rackets. Who are the victims? The victims of these scams are often ordinary people with no criminal records, including single mothers, elderly residents, and low-income families. These individuals are harassed by fake debt collectors who impersonate law enforcement or legal officials, using threats of arrest, license suspension, or court action to coerce payment for debts they may not even owe. Women and non-criminal individuals are disproportionately targeted, often because their identities are easier to exploit without triggering suspicion. Scammers use spoofed phone numbers and stolen personal data to create a false sense of urgency and legitimacy. Identity theft and criminal exploitation. There's growing concern that criminals are using these scams not just for money, but to hijack identities for broader criminal purposes. Victims report receiving calls about debts tied to child support, bail, or court fines, none of which they were ever involved in. This suggests a deeper racket. Stolen identities may be used to cover criminal fines or bail payments, shifting the financial burden onto innocent civilians. Some scams appear to funnel money into criminal networks, under the guise of legitimate debt collection. Echoes of Buffalo's past. Older families in Buffalo recall the city's history with aggressive debt collectors, some of whom operated with mafia-like tactics. Today's scammers may not carry baseball bats, but their psychological warfare is just as damaging. Modern scammers use digital tools and legal jargon, evolving from physical intimidation to emotional and financial manipulation. The legacy of past collectors has normalized fear-based tactics, making it harder for victims to distinguish scams from legitimate collection efforts. Is it just about child support? While some scams claim to collect overdue child support, the reality is murkier. Many victims report being asked to pay for someone else's obligations, including criminal fines, bail, or restitution. This raises ethical and legal questions. Why are innocent civilians being coerced into paying for crimes they didn't commit? Houses are the target of some of debtors due to location's view of stores, type, or number of rooms. What kind of racket is this? The schemes uncovered in Buffalo include spoofing, where falsified caller IDs, email addresses, or sender details are used to appear legitimate. Common methods are caller ID manipulation, forged email headers, and fake websites, causing financial loss and eroded trust. Victims should document messages, block senders, and report to providers. Impersonation involves pretending to be a real person or organization using cloned social profiles, forged documents, or fake law offices to steal money, identities, or reputations. Preserve evidence, notify the impersonated party, and file police or FTC reports. Mail fraud uses physical mail, fraudulent invoices, fake business envelopes, or mail-based payment requests to defraud people and businesses, producing widespread monetary loss and record disruption. Keep mailed items and report to the postal inspector and law enforcement. Data theft is unauthorized access or exfiltration via phishing, credential stuffing, malware, or unsecured storage, leading to identity theft, blackmail, and long-term privacy risk. Change passwords, enable MFA, and notify affected institutions. Sexual harassment covers unwanted sexual comments, advances, or quid pro quo demands delivered in person or online, causing psychological harm and career impacts. Document incidents and report to HR, or seek legal advice. Verbal abuse uses demeaning, threatening, or coercive language. Repeated insults, threats, or public shaming, producing emotional trauma and impaired decision-making. Record exchanges, set boundaries, and involve HR or authorities if threatened. Gaslighting is manipulative behavior that denies events, spreads deliberate misinformation, or isolates victims to make them doubt their memory or perception, resulting in confusion and dependency. Keep dated records, seek third-party corroboration, and get supportive counseling. What can be done? Buffalo's residents, and especially its vulnerable populations, need stronger consumer protections and public awareness campaigns, legal support for victims of identity theft and fraudulent debt collection, accountability for scammers who exploit the justice system's appearance to prey on civilians. Buffalo's debt collection crisis isn't just about money, it's about power, identity, and the erosion of trust. As scammers evolve, so must our defenses. The question isn't just who owes what, but who's being forced to pay for crimes they never committed. Buffalo's violent debt collection legacy, 1910s-1990s. Buffalo's history with debt collection is not just bureaucratic, it's brutal. From the early 20th century through the 1990s, the city bore witness to some of the most violent and coercive debt enforcement tactics in the country. These weren't just financial disputes, they were territorial wars, often carried out by organized crime syndicates and rogue collectors who operated with impunity. Victims were thrown onto the tracks of Central Terminal, a chilling tactic used to send a message to others who owed. Bones were broken, teeth pulled, fingers, limbs, and ears severed, not metaphorically but literally, and far worse. Bodies were dumped into Buffalo's shipping canals, turning the city's industrial arteries into graveyards for the financially vulnerable. Beatings, victims were beaten with sacks of potatoes, pillowcases with tennis balls, rocks, even lemons to obscure bruises after beatings by fists or baseball bats. This era forged a resilient, unshakable spirit among Buffalo's long-standing residents. Families who lived through these decades carry a generational memory of intimidation and a refusal to be cowed by it. Buffalonians are not easily intimidated, especially by today's digital scammers who rely on fear rather than fists. The legacy of survival has become a quiet armor, passed down through stories, warnings, and a collective refusal to be exploited again. From trauma to tenacity, Buffalo's legacy of resistance. Buffalo's debt collection history is steeped in brutality. From the 1910s through the 1990s, collectors operated more like enforcers, throwing debtors onto train tracks at Central Terminal, breaking bones, severing fingers and ears, and dumping bodies into shipping canals. These weren't isolated incidents. They were systemic tactics used to enforce payment through terror. But Buffalo didn't break. Generations of residents endured and adapted, passing down stories not just of fear, but of survival, resistance, and grit. Communities learned to recognize coercion, to protect one another, and to resist intimidation, whether it came from a baseball bat or a spoofed phone call. Today's scams may be digital, but Buffalo's resilience is analog, rooted in memory, muscle, and moral clarity. The city's long-standing families carry a kind of emotional armor, forged in the fires of historical trauma. They are not easily fooled, not easily frightened, and not easily manipulated. This bridge from past violence to present vigilance is more than symbolic. It's a living framework for ethical discernment, recognizing manipulation and refusing to internalize blame for systemic exploitation. Community protection, sharing knowledge, warning others, and building survivor-centered networks of support. Narrative sovereignty, reclaiming the story from fear to fortitude, from victimhood to vigilance. When scammers meet the old school, a collision of tactics and temperament. Buffalo's old-school debt collectors weren't just enforcers, they were legends of intimidation. Operating from the 1910s through the 1990s, they didn't rely on spoofed calls or legal jargon. They relied on presence, reputation, and raw consequence. If today's digital scammers were to cross paths with one of Buffalo's vintage collectors, the outcome would be less about money and more about reckoning. Old-school collectors had a code, however brutal. They knew their targets, they didn't hide behind anonymity, and they didn't exploit the innocent. Modern scammers violate that code, targeting women, civilians, and non-criminals with cowardly impersonation and psychological manipulation. If these scammers were to meet an old-school collector, they'd be confronted with a mirror of their own tactics, only sharper, older, and far less forgiving. The collector wouldn't just expose the scam. They'd dismantle the operation, layer by layer, with streetwise precision and generational fury. It wouldn't be violence, it would be justice, Buffalo style. Direct, unflinching, and rooted in a legacy of protecting one's own. This imagined collision isn't about glorifying brutality, it's about ethical discernment. It reminds us. Buffalo's resilience isn't passive, it's protective. Survivors don't just endure, they remember, they resist, and they retaliate with truth.